G'day folks, check this out. This is a Geecrack Gilling 165. This is a swim bait. We know what a spinner bait is. It's got the blades that spin and it's a spinner bait. A buzz bait is the surface spinner bait that comes across the surface. A wake bait is the lure that just sits under the surface. Our soft plastics in America, they call them soft plastic baits because they're baits made of soft plastic. This is a swim bait because it's a lure that looks like it is alive and swimming. If I hold it on its side, you can see it gets that S curve in it. That's what it looks like coming through the water. It gets a really nice S curve because it's got two joints and it's three-piece. Swim baits have been around for a long time, but it's only in recent times that they've really started increasing in popularity in the Murray cod fishing scene. And that's because more and more anglers are realising the benefits of owning a swim bait. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that they're the best lure, tie them on, they'll catch fish all day, because that's not the case. I find that they fill a void. They fill a couple of voids. There's a couple of spots where I think that these are just ideal. The first and foremost is when you're surface fishing. Anybody that's been surface fishing knows that quite often the Murray cod will boof your lure on the surface, sometimes several times, and fail to hook up and eventually disappear. Quite often, if that fish continues to boof and then doesn't hook up and then disappears, quite often if you put a swim bait on, such as this, that just sits under the water a couple of inches, that fish will come and nail it because the fish just hasn't quite got the confidence to break the surface of the water where it's in danger of being eaten by God knows what, pelican or whatever was around when Murray cod were first invented. Dinosaur, who knows? But they have got an instinct telling them to stay down deep out of sight. They will feed off the surface but they don't like to. So if they're coming up and buffing the lure but not hitting it hard enough, then their senses to telling them something's wrong here. I'm not going to take it, it's a trap. If you put on something a bit more natural looking like that swims under the surface, that might turn that buff into a strike and a hook up and a subsequent catch of a Murray cod. I like to use, and you've seen me talk about these a lot because I love them, the mustard fast dash or fast dash line clips, because you can quickly clip off your surface lure, clip on your swim bait, cast it out and bring the swim bait just under the surface. If the fish comes back, good and well. If it doesn't, clip it back off, clip your surface lure back on and keep fishing. So there is one good use of a swim bait, to try and get that switched on Murray cod that's not hitting your lure hard enough to come back and have a real crack. And something like this Geecrack Gilling is ideal for doing that. And at the end of this video you'll see footage of that very scenario happening. That's one great situation. Another great spot to use them is when you're fishing in rivers. Quite often you'll see the grime build up on the upstream side of logs. They're my favourite spots to fish. I call them scum layers. One of my best mates, Brett Corker, who you would have seen on here, he owns the YouTube channel Cod Gobbler 01. Brett calls it cappuccino. It's like the froth on the top of a cappuccino. But those scum layers are one of my favourite spots, and when you cast a big hard body lure in there, if it's a big deep diving lure, it will dive down and it will only be in the zone for a short period of time. But if you take your big deep diving lure off, quickly clip this fella back on, cast him out, just bring him across just under the surface, because they don't dive, just under the surface in front of the scum layer, you have got a far greater chance of catching one of them fish than what you have with a deep diving lure. Now in saying that, these aren't the be all end all because they don't dive deep, and quite often the fish are down deep. You need to know when they're deep, when they're shallow, when they're near the surface, and you need to know when to put one on, and that's what I'm trying to help you out with this video. So we've got fish that are hitting surface lures that are reluctant to come back or to hit it harder and have a real go. That's probably the best use for these. Secondly, we've got the scum layers that I love. Then we've got the really shallow water. Quite often I fish rivers where there's lots of logs and log jams. And I'll tell you a great scenario. If you're familiar with Lake Mulwala, some of the islands have lots of timber laying down around the edges of the islands in, 1.5 metres to 2 metres of water. And there's heaps of logs and your deep diving lures bouncing up over the logs and it's not diving down. This is ideal because it'll just swim subtly over the logs and it will look natural and it will tempt the cod to come out. Those sort of places are ideal for these. Heaps of big log jams just under the water in reasonably shallow water. Swim bait all the way. Weedy areas. These are great in weedy areas where diving lures get down into the weeds and foul up. These will sit just above the weedy areas and the fish will come up to them, and they do that. That's another good spot. And one of the spots that I love is just running them along close to the bank. You see, when we're in our kayaks or walking the banks, and or even our boats, we're casting our lures to the bank. Seriously, how often do the fish, the Murray cod on a cast lure, hit your lure within the first metre or two of the cast? It's more often than not, isn't it? And that's because quite often the Murray cod are sitting hard up against the banks, under the logs, around the structure, waiting for something to fall out of the tree or jump in off the side or something to swim past. But they are quite often up high and close to the edges. Now, if you've got one of these, instead of casting it towards the bank like you would a normal hard body lure, you will park your boat or your kayak parallel to the bank, cast up along the bank, just reel it in even only a foot or so from the bank, and those fish that are near the edges will come out and hit it. Dynamite. As I stated, these are not the be all and end all of everything. They don't get down to the deep water. If you think there's a big log down 8 or 9 feet and you think there's a fish sitting under it, that's not going to get down. That's not good for trawling in the deep waters of Lake Mulwala and the river channel and stuff like that. But around the edges of rivers, around the edges of lakes, state fall and timber in Lake Mulwala, places like that, this Geecrack Gilling is absolutely ideal for those sort of situations. And for me personally, the spot that I'm most excited to use this is around the scum layers from the layers of film that build up on the upstream side of logs. Rightio folks, just to let you know, this isn't a sponsored item. This was given to me by a friend. I only got one, and it was given to me to try out and have a play with, and so far I'm very, very impressed. It's Japanese made, and with most Japanese lures comes a better level of quality. These are distributed by Dogtooth Distribution. You can Google it's a tongue twister. You can Google Dogtooth Distribution, or you can find them on Facebook, and they will be able to steer you towards your nearest stockist. Now, have a look at this bit of footage. I was surface fishing from my kayak last night. I had a fish subtly hit my surface lure. Then it went bang and failed to hook up. I then made 8 or 9 casts and I never come back. I put the big Geecrack Gilling on and I caught it about 2 casts later. Just under the surface. What that tells me is that that fish was a bit reluctant to come up and strike the surface lure. He was a bit too switched on or a bit too smart for my liking, but he wasn't smart enough to fall for this trap. He took it. Thank you very much for watching. Oh, got him! Oh, missed it again. Oh, I had a strike on the buzz jet. Right in front of them rocks. Haven't had a touch all afternoon. I've been fishing for about an hour, a bit over. Haven't had a touch. Now let's put on this buzz jet. Then a fish just hit it right in front of them rocks. Finally had a bit of action. I've been using the big stump jumpers all day and there's been nothing down deep. I thought I'll try the surface. The big Geecrack Gilling makes a hell of a splash when it hits the water. Got him! Yes! Little one! Oh, just under the surface on this big Geecrack Gilling. Oh. Thank you very much. There we go. Look at that. Nice little Murray cod of around about 45 centimetres, taking on the Geecrack Gilling swim bait. I was fishing it close to the bank up there. Right, yeah, I've just unhooked him. Nice Murray cod of around 40 centimetres, I'd say, maybe a bit more, 43 maybe. There you go, buddy. Now, I'll turn around, so I'm drifting pretty quickly here. Right, I've been fishing for an hour or two and it's been really, really slow. So I decided to try this Geecrack Gilling. Just give it a bit of a run along the edge there near them rocks.